So, thank you, Professor Freidenberg, much appreciated. So yes, I've been at Bentley for many years. I started and then I decided to, after getting my undergraduate, to continue on because, well, they already knew how to take the money. I knew the bursar's office. It became easy. And honestly, it was a really good education. So you're starting your journey. It's a fantastic place. It's something to enjoy. I'm not surprised by what we have here as social platforms. Again, if you haven't joined yet, you're welcome to join the Mentimeter. You can do this on your phone. Menti is a great tool for engagement. You can either scan the QR code or just go to the website. And we can see what is opened, what hasn't. So a little bit about my background. As Professor Freidenberg said, I went to Bentley way back. It seems like the Stone Ages. Don't worry, it was not known as the Bentley School of Accounting and Finance. It was Bentley College back then. And then by the time I finished, it was in the process of changing over to university. And I've been delighted with what I've gained from it. And I've had a really fulfilling career working with people. And I say that because when we talk about social engineering and cyber, which is the topic here, it's about people. It's about you as individuals. It's about you collectively. It's about you socially. And the education that I got here was instrumental in giving me the tools to actually move forward. So the next mentee that we have is, have you ever been a cyber target? This is for you, yourself. If you're on the Menti, it should go ahead and advance automatically for you. You've been hacked. You've had some sort of virus or malware. You've potentially lost money. This is something that really does happen. It happens a lot. It's not just on TV. It's not just to people that are others. It happens to us. It happens to people in the industry. It happens to people who are, dare I say, older and have graying hair, or might have gray hair, or might have lost their hair. It also happens to people whose hair is still growing. It happens to young children. It happens to teenagers. It happens to college students. You are actually ideal targets. I have a cool aspect of my career that I actually get to infiltrate some of the networks, and I get to talk to people who are on the other side of some of these attacks. And I'm very blunt with them as to, why are you doing this? What are you getting out of it? And the answers are surprisingly simple. They're just people. Have people been attacked? Yes. Have they been hacked? Absolutely. So there's a lot out here that has happened. As we can see, even in this room, we've had people who have lost money, data, documents, papers because of this. Back when I was an undergraduate, we had to worry about the same issues, but slightly differently. I remember helping quite a few students who had lost things. There was a virus at the time. It was called Joshi. It was activated on a particular date, and on that particular date, anyone who had things lost it. Lots of papers were lost. There were a lot of tears, as you can imagine. These things absolutely happen. So why do people actually create this? Who creates harm? Why do they create it? Well, there are a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's individuals, sometimes it's groups. It's very common in the United States to actually have cyber crime gangs. These are oftentimes affiliated with actual street gangs and other organized crime. It's not surprised. We can have organizations and corporations that are actually doing cybercrime. Really? Yeah, they do it. And the reason is they're trying to infiltrate and get corporate espionage. Sad, but true. They can be extraordinarily well organized. We have these organizations that do this crime. They operate as businesses, and they will present themselves for things such as Extortion. Your data has been encrypted. You need to get a key. You have to submit this money. They actually have accountants. They have human resources. They do all of the things that businesses do, including hiring interns. Typically not in the United States, but they do these types of activities, surprisingly common. They may use military-grade technology. Is military-grade technology hard to get? No. It's very, very easy. The dark web is full of internet of military-grade technology. In fact, the entire internet itself is military-grade technology. It's based on something called the ARPANET, which has its origins over in Cambridge. Nation states use cyber. They use these attacks. We'll talk about a common example, but we see these, and these are usually done at scale. These are done and will often make the news years after the fact. We'll talk about some of those examples. Why do they do it, though? Why? What is the key to this? Money is the number one reason. Greed. There is a lot of money to be made illegally, illicitly, and people can and will be imprisoned for this. Power, the ability to control others through this. This can be done through misinformation, disinformation. It can be done as a way to control what people do, what actions they'll take. Disruption. Disruption is something we've heard quite a bit about over the last few weeks in particular, because of the political season that we've been in. But disruption is something that happens regularly, and this happens in industry quite a bit, where there is an attack and it's designed to bring down a company. Most people aren't aware that, in fact, the auto industry, the auto repair industry, was actually shut down for almost 3 weeks this summer because of a cyber attack. Most auto repair shops, it turns out, they use one system. That system happened to get encrypted. It created a problem, created massive disruption. And the last one, which is one that you'll all learn way too much about as you go through Professor Freidenberg's classes and other classes, testing. Because whenever you create something, what do you have to do? Test it. Why do they do testing? For the other reason, so that they know what's going on. So when we talk about social engineering, we're talking about the idea of using the human psyche, the way that we think, the way that we operate, to actually change behavior. There's lots of different types of this. Some of this I'm sure you've heard of. You've probably heard of phishing. Spam, of course, is well known. Where does spam come from? Anyone? Correct answer is based out of Minnesota. Hormel Corporation. Spam is something that everyone knows, not that many people liked. They thought that it was over-marketed, and thus it got adapted as a joke into the email industry, and now, of course, it's ubiquitous. By the way, you can still buy spam in grocery stores. Hormel, good company to work with. There's phishing, though. Phishing is when they're trying to do fake types of information. They're trying to get your information through confidence. Spear phishing is a confidence scam. They're using something that's targeted just at you. A phishing email would be something such as, "Dear customer, you have overdrawn your Bentley account and you now owe $3.20 to food services." Your name isn't customer. Spear phishing would actually have your name on it. It would have other information. It's targeted. And then we have vishing. Anyone in here heard of vishing before?
Anyone want to guess what it is?
Anyone want to guess? I'm going to guess that most of you have actually been the subject, the target of a vishing attack. How many of you have ever gotten a call on your cell phone and it's been in a language that you didn't understand? Have you ever gotten one of those? Those are actually vishing attacks. Those are voice phishing attacks. They're trying to get you to take action based upon a call. Have you ever gotten a call from your bank? You've ever gotten a call from tech support? Those are common. They're voice scams. Voice scams. Then there's smishing. Smishing is one that lots of people really, really, really hate, especially anyone who has the ability to vote and who actually made a donation anywhere to any political campaign at all, ever in their lives, or even thought about it. They got SMS phishing like crazy this fall. I don't even know how many times I got attacked. And if you type stop, what actually happened is they actually said, oh, that's a live person. And they would then send your information on. They'd sell it to someone else to see maybe you'll donate to something else. Doesn't matter what your political affinity is, it's a form of actually phishing, and they want money. So it's smishing, SMS phishing. Quishing. Anyone here heard of quishing? Okay. Now, no one in here is going to actually be guilty. How many of you a few minutes ago saw the QR code that was on there to the Menti and you took your phones out and you snapped it? Okay, you were just potentially the victims of quishing. Quishing is a QR code phishing. And it's extraordinarily common where people will change where a QR code goes, or they will just put up a QR code knowing that it's very easy to attack. The reason why they work so well is that cell phones, which is what they're usually used, well, most laptops have cameras that you can use. Cell phones, people would just go and they tap and say, follow that link. You can't see where the link goes in human readable form. Because of that, if there are any exploits on your phone, and if it's not up to date with the daily updates that are available, you are susceptible to being attacked. So quishing, and it is something that we are seeing, and it might be that it goes to a website that's similar. It didn't go to bentley.edu, it went to bentley.edu.kr, or worse, bentley.edu.nk. And they went ahead and they said that, oh, if you wanted to get your grades improved, you just have to click this link. Click, 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 click. Oops, you're not supposed to tell that with the professor in the room. Click, click, click. It's a fake website. NK is North Korea. But you wouldn't see that in the actual QR code. So quishing, something to be aware of. It is an actual attack vector that is being used. And then, of course, there's impersonation. That's where you're being impersonated, where someone is taking over an identity. And we've got things that are making this way too easy, such as voice prints. There's lots of apps where you can change your voice and you can impersonate famous people. They're cool to use, but they're actually pretty scary in what happens. Because once someone has your voice, they actually can do a lot to fool people based on trust. OpenAI, and you'll notice that I don't mention much about AI itself, but OpenAI and ChatGPT are tools that are used to, again, improve the speed of which the communication happens to feel more natural. The way that almost all social engineering works is by fooling you to do something that you otherwise normally wouldn't do. This is based upon the assumption that you are inherently a good person. If you are not inherently a good person, this talk isn't going to help you. Not in a positive way, anyways. There's lots of social platforms. They keep on growing, and they evolve, and they change. If I were to have given a presentation similar to this, say 10 years ago, several of these would not have existed, and the way that the attacks would have emanated would have been slightly different. But I can assure you, even back in the days of bulletin board services, I know Professor Freidenberg knows what those are, but anyone else know what a bulletin board service is? It was an old dial-up modems type of service where you dial in, the most famous of which was AOL. That was how it actually gained a lot of its popularity, was it was a giant bulletin board. And there were lots of different discussions, and they're not used, but the techniques that are used to fool people are exactly the same concepts. The way they get executed is different. They now have tools such as ChatGPT so that they can work faster. We now go across borders much faster, so they may no longer be local. And in fact, most attacks are not. What is this about? Why do these attacks? Well, it's about information disorder. 3 words to etch into your memory: misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. You'll hear about these in the news, whether it's the Vanguard, whether it's CNN, whether it's Fox News, any other news source. You're going to hear about, oh, there's disinformation, there's misinformation. Lots of news don't get the terms usage correctly, but they're very specific. Misinformation is false connection or misleading content. And I'm not going to attach these to any sort of specific political aspects, but know that this is an actual tool that is used with intent by political operatives. And I'm stating that because it is both obvious and insidious at the same time. Disinformation is much more dangerous because this is not only false, it is harmful. This is where the intent is to get you to take action. It's not just false information. False information is the election is taking place next Tuesday, but only if you're not voting for the person who won. That would be false information, misinformation. Disinformation is you're not allowed to vote. If you go to vote, there's going to be a problem. Malinformation is harassment. If you go to vote in Waltham, there's going to be a problem. That's malinformation. It's deliberately there to have a problem. It's harassment. It's harmful by its very nature. It is intended to be harmful. When you get into the harmful types of information, if you see it, if you spot it, it should be reported. If you're not sure where to report it, we'll talk about it a little bit later. IC3.gov is something that becomes a good friend. You can make IC3 reports anonymously. It goes directly into the FBI database. Don't worry, they're not going to come knocking. So what are some examples? This is what most people really want to hear about, want to see, is what does this look like? Well, there's impersonated email. We've all gotten those. You've gotten an email and it says, hi, I need you to do whatever it is. I'm trying to sell you an extended warranty on a car you don't have. Have you ever gotten one of those? We've seen lots of different types of impersonated email. The second one here is actually, in my opinion, one of the scariest things that can happen. Those who are actually taking overt action can move across platforms and move with humans at the speed of a teenager. Why am I saying the speed of a teenager? Because ultimately, teenagers and those who are college-age students happen to be the fastest, the most technically adept at understanding how information moves across different platforms and in different contexts. You know this. I've got teenagers. I work with them. I work with technology. I see how information, talking face-to-face, this thing doesn't happen very often. Calling? No. What is that voice app for? No. What do we do? Sometimes we text. Sometimes I will reach them on Instagram. Sometimes TikTok. Sometimes I have to work with them at the same rate as a teenager because this is the tools that they use. These are the tools that are used. The people who want something will work at that speed. I'm going to show you an example in a moment. They will often prey on loneliness. This is one that has been around for a long time. As humans, we like to be social. Okay, not everyone in here, I can kind of see a few people are kind of in distant corners, that's okay. But for the most part, we like to be social, we like to be liked, we like to be with people. And when there's a social engineering attack and they want something from us, they will prey on that loneliness of being a human. This often happens, especially on dating sites, companion sites, equivalencies, as well as on the regular social networks that are more common. We saw earlier, Instagram was the most common. These are all over the place. And then targeting seniors. And I'm not pointing fingers at anyone in particular here, but seniors are at a significant disadvantage because something happens as we age. I kind of don't really want to put myself into that, but it's happening. Dementia occurs. Think about parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. Dementia happens, and it makes people more susceptible. Loneliness and isolation, and technophobia. By the same token, this is one of the coolest things that I've ever seen, is that seniors happen to be among the most technically adept at social media use. If you think about, okay, how can you talk to parents, grandparents, and so forth? Can you talk to them through direct messages, through texts? Yes. Would they often prefer to use older technologies? Maybe. They might use this older thing called email. That's only for us oldies. But seniors are a common target. Why are they a common target? What do seniors have that most students don't? Money. The number one thing that is usually targeted. So let's take a look. This is an actual attack. I'm only going to show some of the screenshots here, but these are actual screenshots from an attack that took place earlier this year against a 15-year-old. This started on TikTok, and you can see a person was contacted in the afternoon. Hey, boo, I really like your pictures. Like to make a mural. And this was, just to be clear, this particular person happens to be female. It was her spam account. You know what I'm talking about, right? You have your real account and you have your spam account. Because if people are going to contact you, you want to know who your close friends are. Your parents don't get access to that. I know how this works. So that's okay. This was on the spam account. But okay. So the girl responded, okay. She's game. Someone wants a picture. Great. Whatever. Not a big deal. And then the conversation continues. Notice the time that the response comes in. We see that this conversation starts just before 5 o'clock. 80 minutes. We're going to go across 3 different platforms. We're going to commit about 5 crimes. So this is how it starts. From here, it goes over to SMS with real phone numbers. It goes over to email with real email addresses. So now the person's real identity is exposed, the victim's that is. And this is a copy of the check that they actually received by email, and they were given instructions on how to deposit this check by taking pictures of it with their phone to do a remote deposit. This person, who's 15 years old, had never done such a thing. They're not used to checks. How many of you receive paper checks regularly? Only a handful of you. Most people don't receive checks. How many of you write checks regularly? You can raise your hand. No one in here really writes checks regularly. It's not something that's done by most of the younger generations and most people who are technologically advanced. But checks do happen. And so this person was victimized. This is obviously a fake check. When it came to my attention and I took a look at these images, it took about 2 seconds to identify immediate red flags. Now, the 15-year-old, she didn't know what these are because she got a check. She's like, hey, you're paying me $500? Awesome. Money. Sound good? I did blank out her name just for safety, so that's why the name is blotted out. But otherwise, this is the images as they were received. So what we got noticed? A couple of things. First, the micro wasn't aligned. That's a magnetic ink character recognition. It has to match the check number. The check number is in the upper right. Typically, it will have the same number of digits. In this case, it has a leading 0. That in and of itself is not a problem for banking regulations, but the fact that the micro is not aligned means that this is not legitimate. So that was an immediate tip-off. The other thing is that the font of the date is different than the actual check. The check amount and the check amount in words match. But the date is different. If this was actually printed from a regular computer program, those fonts would be the same. Not guaranteed, but with a high degree of certainty. So there were some things that immediately jumped out as, okay, this is fake. But remember who received this? A 15-year-old who wasn't used to receiving checks. Did the bank accept this check? What do you think? The correct answer is yes. The bank accepted this check, and more just like them. Because the bank does verification days later. And yes, when they did the verification failed, and then the money came back out. But in the meantime, it looked like she had money there. She realized there was a problem within 80 minutes. Police were contacted. Authorities were contacted. The next day, literally the next day, she started getting texts because she didn't send money back. She received fake money, but she never sent real money back. Why? Because she got a text from her bank that said, hey, are you sure you're sending money to a person you don't know? Do you really want to do this? That's what tipped her off, and she was like, no, I don't really want to do that. Good thing is, she stopped it. She didn't lose a lot of money. She didn't actually lose any cash. But the next day, she started getting contacts. These are actual screenshots. And yes, she was threatened. She was threatened with death. And if this isn't clear, it wasn't just her that was threatened, it was her entire family. And I'm only showing you one of several images. The images and the videos that were sent, Gory does not even describe them. I wish I could get the images out of my head, because I unfortunately did have to see them. They included people actually getting murdered. So this is just one image, and you can see this is a video. Those guns were used. Whether they were the final weapons used, I don't know. But you can see, in fact, the family was threatened. 80 minutes to go from start to fraud, and then for it to be abandoned. This went on for a week. This girl was terrorized for a week because she didn't fall fully prey. Unfortunately, because this happened, she is now a target, and her information continues to get sold on the dark web as a potential target by other gangs. So these are the types of incidents that actually occur. To the best of our knowledge, all of the people who are creating this were based in Africa. So some more forms of social engineering. Deep fake job offers. How many of you want to get a job? How many of you would love to have a job for next summer? Sounds good? What if it's an online job where it's easy money? All game. Beware. There are a lot. And this includes on LinkedIn, and it includes on the social media sites. You'll see this on Instagram. All you have to do is contact me, and then you'll start getting contacts saying, oh, we want to interview you. The most common place for these interviews is on WhatsApp. How many of you use WhatsApp? We use WhatsApp. It's an app. It's fine. It's like any of the other direct messaging types of programs, and it allows for group messaging and all the other pieces. Why do the scammers like this? Because it's encrypted, like many of the other programs. And it does not require much validation. But once you initiate a communication, they do have a cell phone number to communicate with. And that becomes very useful if they're able to do a takeover of your cell phone. And they will try. Because they can do that, they can get by MFA. So that's the purpose behind this. So we'll talk about deep fake job offers. If someone says they want to interview you, but you need to do it through another platform, it's not through a website with an actual camera that you can see the other people. It's not with a phone number. It's not a company that you know of that you can look up on many different places and validate. You can't go to career services and they can't validate. Stop. If it's a company that's legit, you contact career services, they'll validate it and they'll say, yeah, you got this, go for it. Bentley Career Services, awesome. We'll talk about smishing attacks. I'll show you some examples of those that happened this year. And one of the ones that I hate to say this, but it's true. College students are at a high degree of attacks for, especially those who might be at, how do I put this, events where there might be beverages. You will hopefully have the appropriate age to obtain those beverages. If you don't have the appropriate age to obtain those beverages, I don't want to know about it. But if you were to be at an event and someone says, hey, you look cool, can we chat? Let me give you my digits. Just give me your phone. Can you just log in? It's not uncommon for it to be a two-person scam, especially if it's a person you don't know. They may not go to Bentley. They may actually be a part of a duo or a trio where one person is looking from behind to see what your actual PIN number is. The other person puts in a number which may or may not be legitimate. And at some point, your cell phone may get misplaced. The reason for it is very simple. They want a cell phone takeover. They want your cell phone number, because with that, they have access to your email. They have access to your MFA. They have access to much of your life. It takes approximately 20 minutes for a seasoned scammer to drain a person of their life savings. That's it. 20 minutes. Be careful. If your device is protected with biometrics, such as your face or your fingerprint, that's better. But there's almost always a backup of a PIN. Don't use it, especially if you're in a crowded area. Someone else may be watching. A cool thing that was rolled out for those of you who have iPhones in iPhone 8 in iOS 18.1 is after approximately 96 hours of non-use, it automatically locks, requires both a PIN and other identification. So if there's non-use, it actually starts to lock out the device. It's the equivalent of it being restarted, because it actually will restart the device. Why is getting by MFA so significant? Multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor is something of what you know, who you are, what you are. What you know, who you are, how you actually behave. Why is getting by it so important? Because that's a technique to protect information. How many of you have a Social Security number? Or an equivalent? You have an identification number issued by the United States government. How many, you can keep your hands up. How many of you have had your information likely taken? Yes, it's the same number. Just last month, over 85% of all Social Security numbers with identifying information was exposed again. This stuff gets sold on the dark web regularly. Your Social Security number is something you should keep very, very private. Doctors don't need it, hospitals don't need it. It's only needed for governmental forms. So let's take a look at a couple of attacks. Again, social media attacks. Social engineering attacks, rather. So this is an example. This is one that happened in June. I actually received this one. Fairly common in the United States and Canada as well, where there is a group that's been going after and creating look-alike websites and going after what they call micropayments. So they send out these types of text messages to anyone they thought might be in the state. How did they think you might be in the state? Based upon the prefix. My phone has a Massachusetts-based prefix. The area code. It's based in Massachusetts. So, like many people, I received this text. Received multiples of them. $4.15. If I were to actually go to that website, which I haven't checked it lately, but it looked a whole lot like EasyPass, and was asking people to go ahead and pay their balance, in which case they lost their credit card information and other components almost instantly. So this was received on June 5th. It was reported to the Massachusetts State Police in the Fusion Center, and it was reported by the news 2 days later because lots of people started to get them, including news reporters. It was actually reported by the Mass Department of Transportation in their weekly updates on June 21st. These are very significant. Why was this attack so successful, not so much in Massachusetts, but around the country? It's $4.15, less than a Starbucks. If you lose $4.15, fine, you won't go to Starbucks today. It's not going to affect tomorrow. You can go tomorrow, you just may not go today. Not a big deal. But at scale, when you get 1 million of these, that's real money. And that's what they're based on. Here's another one. In this one, you are a target. Make no mistake, you are a target. You get a text, you're expecting a package. Doesn't matter whether it's UPS, USPS, FedEx, Amazon, Target. These often come in through smishing. And it says, hey, you need to do this, or one of the ones I've seen recently is, your postage was 30 cents too short. Go to this website. And it comes in with a link, and the link says United States Postal Service. As soon as you click on the link, it asks you for your information. You probably have it stored in your phone. You say, oh, not a big deal. You provide it. It shows up on screen. Oh, it was intended for you anyways. As soon as you click it, your accounts are now locked, hopefully, or you've just lost money in whatever accounts came up. So this is an example. This is a very real one that happened this summer. These go on daily. College students are targeted. So what are the attack patterns? Why do they do this? Why go through this? Again, it's about money or power or disruption. Those are the reasons. But the way they do this, oftentimes through phishing or other similar vectors, quishing, vishing, and so forth. Spear phishing, which is really trusted. It looks like it came from a trusted professor named Professor Friedenberg. But in fact, it wasn't from Professor Friedenberg at all. It was from someone who's using some generic Gmail account, because it turns out that the RFC 822, which is the actual standard for email, has two parts to it. It has the name part, which is just letters and characters, where it says Professor Mark Friedenberg, or it also has the RFC 821, which is the part that has a local part that says M. Friedenberg, @ and a domain, such as bentley.edu. That local part oftentimes isn't hidden. On your cell phone, you have to tap 3 times to see it. Not once, not twice, but 3 times to see the actual email address. You get it and it says Professor Friedenberg, you're going to open it. You get it and it says it's from your parents, you're going to open it. At least look at it. That is a spear phishing attack, because it is targeting you. Baiting is when they'll give you a reward. If you follow this link, you're going to get $100. Now keep in mind, there are 2 types of baiting. There's legitimate baiting. This happens often by marketing companies that are doing legitimate baiting. That includes if you're going to do surveys and other things, they're baiting you to do something. But when you get to the inappropriate types of baiting, you go ahead and you click on this, and they're going to send you fake merchandise. This happens. One of the more common places we've seen for baiting recently is Kickstarter and Indiegogo, where they're actually baiting people for fake products. Quid pro quos, these are very dangerous. Quid pro quos is when they're actually looking for people to take specific actions, and they are usually knowingly fake, false, bad, evil, and or illegal actions. Sometimes it's to become what we call a mule, where the people are actually transporting money back and forth. And then there's pig butchering. Hate the name, but there's a reason for it. Pig butchering is a trusted attack, usually financial, and it goes something like this, where someone will say, hey, I've got this idea, I've been proven that if you invest a little bit of money, it's got great returns. So if you can invest $50, you're going to make 30% on your money. $50, that's real. But okay, we'll try it. It's $50. So you invest $50, and a week later, you get back $65. Hey, this sounds pretty good. If you invest $100, you get back $130. That's pretty good. Can you invest $200? Okay, now we're game. Invest $200. A week later, you get back $260. Now they up the, can you invest $1,000? That's a lot of money. but they've proven it. They've now done it 3 times. Okay, you invest $1,000. You borrow the money from friends, from family. You invest $1,000, and nothing happens except you've just lost $1,000. Thank you very much. You are now done. They fattened up the pig. They've now butchered it. This is how pig butchering works. It's a social engineering scam that works typically with real money and fake websites to show where that money is. Sometimes the money transactions in and out are legitimate. You'll see the money go into your bank account. And yes, if you were to stop, you would actually be taking their money. But then you'd potentially have to deal with the text messages as that girl did. But they are quite good at building up the trust until they get to a sufficient amount of money. This is particularly common with people who have decent amounts of disposable income. It also is surprisingly common with college students. Why? Because you have access to people who have money. Otherwise, chances are you wouldn't be at Bentley if you didn't have access to someone who at least was helping for the various expenses. They often do this through trial runs, where they will do it with a small amount, such as the $50. For most of these attacks, they will do trial runs. They will do an attack, they'll get a credit card number, and they'll do a 5-cent transaction or a 19-cent transaction. And you look and you say, oh, that must be one of those micro-transactions that happens when you connect it and, oh, it just came in late. That's to validate it. And then once they get validation, that information gets sold almost instantly on the dark web. Credit card number is usually worth around $30, and it works. It does. It's sad. And
how do you know if it's an inside job or not? It's a bank.
It often isn't. It's often because the information was on some site. But once it happens, at least if you're using a credit card that gets exposed, you have some time to get it corrected, and your exposure is limited to $50 in the United States. If you're using a debit card, it's a little bit different. You do have some exposure. If you find it within 3 days, you're limited typically to $200. Depends on the bank and the state. If it goes beyond that, you often have no limits to the exposure if it is a debit card. Banking regulations are not friendly to college students. Be very, very careful. Now, some banks will offer protections. Make sure that you read it. Sometimes people will have coverages that are part of their other insurance, homeowners, which may or may not include college students, renters coverage, which if you're in an apartment you should have, often will cover these types of things, but not always. Depends upon what it is. It's often worth looking into. So the language that's used is most often English, but not exclusively. We've seen types of attacks in virtually every language that's used on the internet. We've seen successful attacks in every language used on the internet. English is the most common, but I've seen attacks done in Spanish. I've seen attacks done in Mandarin. I've seen attacks done in Russian. I've seen attacks done in Farsi. They're all over the place. The purpose behind them is to bypass trusted platforms. And I'm not referring to the trusted platform machine that may be in your hardware. I'm referring to the human trust. Because once they bypass your trust, you're liable. As far as the bank is concerned, you authorized those transactions, and that becomes a real problem. So the purpose is to bypass trusted modules. And it leverages our natural curiosity. How do I know that? We had a whole bunch of people that went ahead and contributed to the Mentimeter by using the QR code. You're curious, what is this thing about? How does this work? Is Mentimeter okay? My opinion, it is. It works. So with that, let's talk about something, unfortunately, you may have to deal with. I apologize in advance for those of you who are technically apt. You're all here, which means that you have some technical aptitude. You are likely to be a part of this. So this brings us actually to our last Mentimeter. Have you ever been asked to provide tech support for anyone? If you've ever been asked, please select yes. If you've never been asked by anyone, select no. I'll click on this in a moment. This is what happens. We're a part of the digital economy. We're a part of the digital universe, and you get asked, can you help me? Parents are especially known to do this of their college students because college students know everything, right? And they're like, this isn't working. Can you help me with this? And what happens it's sad, but this is just real. So let me load this up. This is based on a true story. This is by a company called Wiser.
Dad's scam. He called me super late the other night because he just bought a new printer and was trying to connect it to his Mac. Honestly, I was tired and kind of impatient, so I told him, hey, just call me.
Let me pause this just for a second
well,
so I can
instead of waiting,
adjust the volume here.
I really messed up and got my dad scammed. He called me super late the other night because he just bought a new printer and was trying to connect it to his Mac. Honestly, I was tired and kind of impatient, so I told him, hey, just call me in the morning. We'll figure it out then. Well, instead of waiting, he Googled how to set up the printer and, of course, ended up on some scam website. He called the number thinking it was HP. The person on the phone told him he needed to install TeamViewer so that he could help him out. My dad, not realizing, just followed their instructions. Once they were connected, the scammer opened the terminal and started running commands in the background. The guy was trying to sneak into my dad's Google account, and on top of that, tried to get him to sign up for this ridiculous $500 a year support plan. That's when my dad finally thought, wait, this doesn't feel right, so he hung up and called me. The next few hours, I spent them cleaning up his computer. Unfortunately, scam websites pop up all over Google search results, even in ads. Just because you call the number from a search doesn't mean it's legit. There are even scam sites targeting people who've already been scammed, like when they're searching for an attorney or someone to help them get their money back. So whether it's your parents, friends, or anyone else who's looking for help, remind them not to just call some random number they find online or let anyone access their computer. You never know who's on the other end. Better safe than sorry.
All too real. Does this resonate? If he would have just taken the few minutes to set up the printer, but this happens. Again, if we go back to the Mentimeter, we can see, let's update it here. 18 people in here have said that you've done tech support. That means that the people that you're supporting that have asked you are all susceptible to that type of scam. Are you susceptible to that one? Maybe not as much. Note, I'm not saying that you're not susceptible. Just not as much because you're the one providing the support. But 18 people that you know, and probably many more than that because it's probably multiple people asking you, they are susceptible. This is a very real issue. So what can we do? In the end, there are ways to help be protective. If I were just to scare you and tell you about all the bad things that would happen and not give you any tools, that wouldn't be very fair. Also wouldn't be all that informative either. So there are two base categories of information that people are trying to get from you. There's the technical threats. These are the ones that tend to be the most fun for the geeks in the room. I like these, the technical. This is where they're going ahead and they're using TeamViewer and they're attacking the computer and they're entering in various root commands. We can get to the various types of rootkits and all sorts of different things. We can start talking about Stuxnet and other tools that have been used historically. I'll get back to what that is in a minute. Trusted technical threats is untrusted Wi-Fi. You go over to Starbucks and you connect up and it looks like it's not really Starbucks, but just even connecting to Starbucks Wi-Fi, it's open, it's untrusted. Anything you send on there can be seen. All of the data you send can be seen. It can be interrupted. It could be a fake Wi-Fi router. These do happen. Those are technical threats. They're not very common, but they can happen. They tend to be highly targeted. And then there's gaming extensions. Gaming is fun. It's a great way to pass the time. But it's also something that can be fraught with exposure. One of the places I've seen a lot of these pop up is Discord, which is often used as a place where people can talk and chat while doing various types of gaming. I've seen a lot of different types of extensions, and a lot of them have malware built in, so they allow for backdoors to be accessed. Why do they want the backdoors? Because they want to typically install password monitors so that when people access things, especially banking websites, they then have access. Or when people access their email, so they can then take it over. Or they access their AT&T account or their Verizon account or their Sprint account, so they can take over their cell phone. It's all about bypassing the MFA so that they can get trust. Once they've got trust, they can then reset passwords, hold people hostage, and or just take their money. Free software. There's nothing in life that's free. You know you've heard this. I'm not telling you anything you haven't heard before. But really, know what you're giving up. Sometimes it's just information. Your information is valuable. Anyone know what the number one most valuable demographic is in marketing for consumer goods in the United States? The hardest area to grasp, the most valuable set of data. Anyone want to guess? It's families with kids. That is the most valuable marketing data. Families with kids, because there's a high amount of disposable used income that has to be spent because, well, kids. Anyone who's had kids or has been a kid or is a kid, you know what I'm talking about. It's expensive. That is the number one demographic. So they will often give things to you for free to get your information, try and sell you stuff. That's okay, as long as you know what you're giving up. But nothing in life is free. So if you download something, it's a free tool, it's free information, know what it is that you're giving up. Also, be aware one of the scams that happens is USB memory sticks, or you get a free USB memory card. You attend this event and you get the slides or the information or the files on USB memory card. The moment you put that card into your computer is never, ever the same. Because the way that it actually interacts, whether it's USB-A or USB-C, doesn't really matter. The protocols fundamentally are the same. Once that connection happens, that electrical connection happens, what happens next is that the computer does it does an exchange of information. In that exchange of information, there are flaws in those protocols, and it can be leveraged. There's only one way, if there's malware installed on that, to correct it, and that is to destroy the machine. That's physical destruction, by the way. Not something that I would recommend. There's not like there's software that will undo it. It's not common, but it does happen. The biggest place where we see this risk is actually with cell phones in airports. This is where we see this risk most often actually executed, where they will put in a chip inside of a charger that you'll see at a desk or at a bar type of area at an airport. You might even see these at Logan and so forth. And you go to charge your phone, you plug it in. Well, as soon as you do that, you're taking a risk, a significant risk. Much safer, carry your own outlet. so you're actually plugging directly into AC power. And that way you're using your own trusted device. So those are some of the technical attacks we actually do see. They're not all that common, but they do occur. The geeky side, those are cool. But then we get to the social engineering. These are the ones that are actually even more scary because they affect you. They affect your family. They affect people you care about. This is where we are targeting behavioral change. They're going after job offers. They're going after how you work. Friendly online chats, I see these almost daily, where people are trying to prey on information. As a technical professional, I set up something called a honeypot. Any of you familiar with that term? A honeypot? That is a term that's used in the industry where it's similar to a pot of honey to attract bees. I will set up areas to see who will come and try and attack, who's attracted to a particular profile. It's segmented, so it's safe from a technical perspective, but it does attract bad actors. And it's really interesting to see how it gets attacked. And this can be everything from fake Instagram profiles that look real. They have real photos and things like that. And these get used. So let's talk about nation states. It's not as if politics has been in the news at all, has it? A little bit over the last week or so. But there are lots of attacks that happen at the nation state level. This is one that is pretty well documented. Putin on Ukraine. At the start of the Ukraine war and all the way through now, Vladimir Putin and Russia have been waging an information campaign, an information management campaign, largely disinformation and malinformation, to try and explain their war, both inside of Ukraine and inside of Russia. And to a lesser extent, inside of the United States and Western countries. So it started with the war, which by all means is a military war, being called a special military operation. Internally, that is what they call it. The justification, if you look at the propaganda, it's often still, to this day, considered denazification. That's the accusation. They're trying to remove the Nazis from Ukraine. The reality is in Ukraine, it is not full of Nazis. Nazis were in Germany and other places during World War II. And there's a lot of experience in here of creating others, othering people, degrading others, and making it so that they're subhuman. They're less than people. And by doing that, which is really significant, it changes the approach. People become less apt to understand, be receptive to legitimate information. So when we talk about these types of attacks, this is a nation-state type of attack that has been going on for 2.5 years and still continues. We see similar types of attacks with other significant conflicts, and we see it politically. We see this daily. Be careful of what you actually see in various types of secondary and tertiary media, because a lot of the sources of that oftentimes can actually be malinformation. Occasionally, it does affect mainstream as well. So what can you do? How can you protect yourself? How can you actually take positive action? First, this is an easy one. Be a bit skeptical. Okay, now I have a question. Everyone's seen the slide. How many of you looked at the dog first? Puppy first? That's okay. How many of you have looked at what's next to the puppy? I didn't think so. The puppy's very cute, but if you look at the details next to it, you'll realize this entire picture is a scam. That's why it's there. Be a bit skeptical. Realize you are a target. They want your information. They want your money. They want your power. They want your influence. Be skeptical about what you see, what you read, who you interact with, if they're not real in the real world. If it's people you know in person, you can meet them in person. If you are the recipient of actual harm, report it. I do expect that each of you, at some point over the next even couple of years, will have multiple reports that you can make, and I hope you do make, to the appropriate, the official word is authorities, but the appropriate places so that people know what's going on. The reason for this is not for personal benefit, to be quite blunt about it. It is not so that, oh, the FBI is going to come and get your money back. They're not, most likely. But if you have no damages and you get something where you followed a link to a phishing email or spear phishing, you received something and it seemed fake, please report it. If it came in as a smishing attack, both Android and iOS allow you to delete and report. That goes back to the vendors. They are working with the FBI and authorities on the back end, and they will stop those attacks in the future. That's why they ask you to report it. If you get it through other sources, such as an email, or you get it through a website, you get it by going through social media, and you've got screenshots, all those count. You can go to ic3.gov. ic3.gov is operated by the FBI. It's a website. No one monitors the site. Well, actually, they monitor the site, but they don't monitor everything that goes into it automatically. It will get filtered. But the purpose behind it is that at scale, the FBI is actually really good at being able to identify what's happening within various pieces, and then they can go after the various attackers. And they have had success. But they need the reports. They need to know what's happening. This is why I'm putting it up there. It takes anywhere from 30 seconds to about 3 minutes to fill out an IC3 report. Once you've submitted it, you almost certainly will not hear back. Once you submit it, there's no way to get it back. It's very simple. If you have losses, if you've lost money, if you suspect someone else might be at risk, they gained your identity, they gained your personal information, those are all damages. First, if you're on campus, call local police, call the campus police. If you live off campus, call the police department in which you live. If it occurred on campus, contact campus police as well. Campus police will work with Waltham police. Campus police are actually authorized by the state police. This is important so that you actually have a police report. If they gained any financial information, like a debit card number or credit card number, you can then have a report that you can provide as proof of what actually happened. Really important. So contact local police. Also file to ic3.gov. Again, it's really fast. They ask, provide information that you have. If you don't have it, you skip it. It's not a big deal. And your insurance company, if you have one. This may be your parents' insurance company. Depends upon your individual situation. But if you have losses, you may actually have insurance that will help mitigate those losses. People tend to be surprised that insurance actually can cover this. Sometimes auto insurance policies will have a rider for cyber. In Massachusetts, there are a couple of auto insurance companies that if you have AAA, you automatically get cyber insurance. Who knew? Pretty cool, though. If you're in industry, such as you've got an internship, you're working in a particular area, contact whatever that sector is. So that could be CISA, which is a computer and infrastructure support. That's a federal agency. It could be a specific industry segment, such as there's one of the industries I work in is faith-based, and so we've got faith-based information sharing, and there's other organizations that we report things through. So I'll report things often through the Secure Community Network as well. So by industry network, report it to the appropriate industry. If it's in banking, it might go to one of the regulators, such as the Federal Reserve or to the FDIC. It depends upon what the organization is, or to the comptroller of the currency. So it depends. You'll want to get the right reporting where possible. If you're unsure, police will usually help direct you for that industry-based report. Why? Because if it's a financial scam, the bank was also scammed. In some cases, banks, especially with financial information, are so fast to respond. And I know of a case that happened where a college student, they fell prey to one of those USPS scams. Before they knew it, before they even saw the page, All of their bank accounts were locked by their bank because the bank picked up that their information had been taken, locked their accounts, which was awesome. They had no financial losses. It was awful. They had no access to any money. And what does a college student do when they have no access to any of their funds? Two things. Two things happen consistently. One, cry. Second, contact their parents. This is just what happens. But please, don't be silent. So, really important. Ask yourself, just because it's online, is it true? We know the answer to that. No. Who benefits from misinformation? How do you identify the echo chambers that we live in? We live in an area where we tend to hear things that are common. And what tools do we have? What tools are provided to us? So be vigilant. Tools, which a lot of people say, oh, you have to have this tool and it will protect you. They're only a small piece of the puzzle. But you want to have them. You want to have an anti-malware. Doesn't matter whether it came from the vendor, such as if you're working on a Windows laptop and you're using the Microsoft Defender, it's fine. If you want to use a third-party paid service, that's fine too. Just make sure you have something decent and up to date. Keep your mobile devices up to date. I can't stress this enough. Mobile devices are the #1 attack vector these days. If you've got an iPhone and it's not at iOS 18.1 or later, 18.11, make sure that it's up to date. Report problems, really significant. Use a good password manager. And I'm not referring to the one built into Google. I'm not referring to the one built into iOS. Those don't count. The reason is there are fundamental flaws in the underlying ecosystems that allows access to that information. You want a third-party password manager that you can actually, dare I say, print out occasionally your passwords and have them stored in a vault somewhere, in a printed vault. Beware the vendors. How many of you have heard of a company that was known as Dashlane? You ever heard of that? It's a company based in Boston. They made a password manager. They got hacked. All of their customers got hacked. So be careful. How many of you have heard of a company, let's see, called Google? They got hacked. People who had Google accounts, is going back a few years, their information got released. This stuff happens all the time. Beware of the vendors, beware of the information you give them. Use multi-factor authentication. Secure one-time passwords, they call OTP, is preferred. That's preferred over SMS or the short message service or the text messages that we often get. Those are not preferred. Why? Because if someone takes over your cell phone and they port it out, you lose access to it. If you have a secure OTP, secure one-time password, that's where you have a scan and you have to get a number and it changes every 30 seconds. That's a secure one-time password. Those tend to be much better. But again, you want those to be through a trusted service. Those often work with mobile apps. You want to have good credential manager. Credentials, that's your identity. That's you. Consider your credentials as important as your actual debit card and credit card. Don't give them out. Unless, of course, you don't mind someone else acting as you for the rest of your life and there's no going back. Because once your identity is out, it's almost impossible to actually fully ever get it back. You can protect things, but you can never get your identity fully back. Keep your identity to yourself. Beware of what you make public. Once information about you is public, such as your gender, your social media usernames, your email, your mother's maiden name, all of that information, it will be used, sold, stored on the dark web. And those are the common questions that get asked as backup questions for information. What am I saying? It's okay to lie for those questions. Just remember what you used. So if you grew up on, I'm going to choose, say, Alder Street, the first of the trees, or Alder Court, great. You're not going to put that in. You might choose, say, another tree, say elm, to put in. For some websites, and if it's not elm, it might be oak. So pick and choose which of the different places that you want to use. But try to not use real information that people might be able to learn, because otherwise they will mine your social media. They will mine who you are to get access to your sites. And they might not do it now. They might do it in 3 years. They might do it in 4 years. They might do it in 5 years. Why? What will happen in 5 years? You'll hopefully all have jobs and have more disposable income. And they will start and store that information. It is how that industry works. It's incredibly well organized. It's professional. And unfortunately, it's profitable. Any questions? Questions, thoughts? Do you feel as if you can be more secure?
What reactions to what you've heard? Anybody surprised?
How many of you think that you could fall prey to the types of attacks that I showed here? It's not unreasonable. I showed you a TikTok attack, literally 80 minutes from the start of that attack until the time it was done. And you had, in that case, multiple frauds that actually occurred.
Can you put up the slide that I gave you?
What was that?
Can you put up the slide that I emailed you for attendance? Can you put up the slide that I emailed you for share attendance? Well, if Dan puts up the slide for attendance, I was going to think about. And yes, I'm going to give you a QR code to scan, but you can hopefully trust that that's real. It really did come from me. This is a good time for us to take questions or reactions to what you've heard. Anything that you learned that might have surprised you, or anything that you hadn't seen before. Don't all speak at once. Louis, one thing you learned today.
I learned about the different types of scams. Like, I have heard about phishing before, but I didn't know about all the other ones, so that was surprising and kind of good to learn about. It was really informative.
I learned what actually happens if you fall for one of these scams, like with the example with the girl that you gave a little bit earlier.
I didn't quite catch that.
You said they learn what happens when you fall for one of these scams.
Great question. When you fall for a scam, first thing to do is to report it. And in that case, the girl, she had to go through quite a bit of counseling, and she still knows that her information is out there. And she will never fully get her identity back, because they got her name, they got her phone number, her actual phone number, so they know who she is. And her information has been sold, because I've been monitoring it. It's kind of scary, but she's more cautious. She doesn't put as much out there publicly.
So do you have to go under like a new identity after that, or what?
She hasn't changed her identity. It's more of she's just more careful. Because when they aren't able to successfully conclude a scam, she doesn't become sold as a full mark. So an example, a flip side to that is there was a woman, Canadian woman, who then wound up leaving Canada for another country, who wound up actually scamming many people in New York, older people, out of their life savings. And it was sad. She would prey on them knowing that they were, well, older and lonely, and they lost their life savings. What did they do? Most of them went on Medicaid, lost their apartments, went into public housing. They were destitute. The woman was extradited to the United States, arrested, convicted, served federal time in federal prison, and then she ultimately was extradited after she got out of prison. So for her, crime didn't really pay. She now lives in rural Canada. And she's not allowed into the United States and a bunch of other countries as well, because she knows what it is. In her case, just to close out that story, she got a reduced sentence. There was only about 4 years because she actually turned in the rest of, effectively the gang, it was the rest of that company. And when I say company, it was actually a company. They had offices, and this is what they did, is they went and they scammed people, and they scammed people out of tens of millions of dollars over the course of 4 years.
What can companies do with your voice sample if they just get you to say yes, for example?
So let's say a user experience center gets a voice sample, and those samples get acquired inappropriately, just as an example. What they can do with a voice sample is they can use it to create fake voices, and they can use it to create text and speech. The most common usage of this is actually sometimes called the grandparent scam, where they will contact someone, usually a grandparent, and say that a person has been kidnapped, and they'll use those techniques, they'll use the snippets that they got as proof of life that the grandkid, because they know the person's name usually, has been actually attacked. And so now, they'll put enough snippets together to say, hi grandma, hi grandpa. And all it costs to release this child is $5,000 cash. And someone will stop by, quite literally, pick up $5,000 in cash. That person is usually a mule. They keep some of the cash, the rest of the money goes on. So with a voice sample, it's oftentimes used for that type of illegal activity. It's unfortunate, but it happens.